You're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. 4:15 is the time. We're rocking and rolling from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Get on board, 609-919-9200. Got to talk a little NCAA tournament hoops right now. In addition to some football, nobody better to do it with than the man that does it all in the broadcasting world from CBS and Westwood One. And by the way, you can listen to the national championship game and also the Final Four action this upcoming weekend going into Monday right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, WNJE, Trenton, Philadelphia. Now joining us is the very diverse Ian Eagle. Bird, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
What's up, Zach? How you doing?
Well, it's always great to hear your voice, especially during this time of the year, so I'm doing great. You got a chance to see that South Carolina team twice at Madison Square Garden this past weekend. No one saw this run coming. They were a 300-1 odd to get to this spot and win the national championship when the month of March did start. After seeing South Carolina up close and personal, just how impressed are you with what Frank Martin's doing?
Oh, legitimate Cinderella. Like you, before the tournament started, they were not on my radar. They were a 7 seed in the East. Everybody was talking about Villanova and Duke and the possibility that those two programs could collide at Madison Square Garden over regional weekend. And meanwhile, South Carolina came in, and they were impressive from the start. It's not as if this team stumbled out of the gate and found its footing. South Carolina was good right from the very beginning. Against Marquette, Duke led them at halftime. They blew their doors off in the second half in the second round. They beat Baylor by 20 in the regional semifinals. And the Florida game was close, but South Carolina made all the big plays defensively. They are tough. They are suffocating. The offense was unexpected. I think that's the one area where everybody just assumed they would not be able to hang. They were the worst shooting team in the SEC this season, but they had the best scorer in Sindarius Thornwell. They got strong performances from Dozier, from Notice, Chris Silva, Mike Kotsar played well. And the Frank Martin story is fantastic. He is likable, genuine, real, and I think all of those qualities came out over the course of the first 2 weeks of the tournament.
We know motivation is a great factor, but just because you're motivated doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of success. And this team, even when they got out of the first weekend, people were given the excuse, oh, they got a fortuitous break with the draw in Greenville and all that, and that's why they beat Duke. How much of a chip do you really just sense is on their shoulder right now since you got to see them this past weekend?
Yeah, I think they've carried it throughout the year. They were picked 8th in the preseason poll for the SEC, so they weren't getting respect within their own conference. They get into the tournament, they get a 7 seed, and they were really an afterthought. Most people probably picked Marquette just based on the fact that Woj had gotten some things going with that program, and South Carolina's offense was very much a critical factor in why they weren't seated higher. You could see the numbers didn't lie. They don't shoot the ball well. They don't score easily, at least in the regular season and the SEC tournament. But things have switched in this NCAA tournament. They have fed off Thornwell, and others have played their part well. Silva's been a low-post presence. He attacks the rim. Certainly a guy that can offensive board with the best of them. And as mentioned, Mike Kotsar is a freshman from Estonia, complete wild card on this big stage. And I do think the Martin dynamic with this team has been a huge part of this run, that he believes in them, they believe in him. It's been symbiotic. And we've seen this in the NCAA tournament. It is, in many ways, similar to UConn from a couple of years ago. That was not the best UConn team, but Shabazz Napier had a fantastic run in the tournament, and everybody filled their role to a T. With all that said, I think this is a very tough matchup for them in the national semifinals. Gonzaga has gone under the radar a bit, even though they were a 1 seed, even though they suffered just 1 loss during the season. They're incredibly balanced, and everything has fit into place here. They got a good draw. I think Mark Few has learned from mistakes in the past. This is a good, diverse, balanced group. I like this Gonzaga team a lot.
And this Gonzaga team, they're very big down low in the post. And you take a look at this South Carolina defense, and it's a very simple defense to me, but they do such a perfect job at being so brilliant with the small details, just getting hands in the passing lane. That South Carolina defense against the bigs, it could be a little bit of a problem for South Carolina, I agree. And I'll be interested to see how Martin tries to just try to take those bigs out of the game and try to contain them.
Yeah, and I think that's where South Carolina is going to run into trouble. This Florida team that they played, that was not a serious issue for them. They're not huge up front. Egbunu going down when he did for Florida for the rest of the season hurt their depth, and they had to shift some things around and give some guys minutes that had not played minutes throughout the season. That's not the case with Gonzaga. Just look at up and down their roster. They have 5 players that average double figures. They're a solid rebounding team, not one specific guy, but they all chip in. Williams Goss, he averages 5.5 boards per game. Karnowski's up around 6 per game. Collins is in that same area. Williams is like 6.5 per game. That means they do it from a team concept. And you're right about their size. They're long, and I think, unfortunately for South Carolina, this is the exact kind of team that they'll have a problem with.
Ian Eagle with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. One of the big parts about your job that I'm very jealous about is that you get to meet with all these coaches before the games. And I think the insight that you get from them is very cool from all the different coaches that you get to talk to. Martin's such an interesting personality. He's perceived the way that he really probably doesn't come off in those types of meetings. What is it like to interact with Frank Martin in those meetings?
Yeah, Zach, I had never met the man for all the years that I've done the tournament, 20 years doing the NCAAs. Never had Kansas State when he was there. Didn't have South Carolina since he's been there. This is his first appearance in the tournament. They don't appear on CBS. So I had a blank sheet. I had no real idea what to expect other than what I had seen on TV. Snippets of press conferences, shots of him reacting on the sidelines. And I do think there's a huge misconception with Coach Martin. He was very much real and deep, and Donnie Marshall and I worked the games. I interviewed him one day, Donnie interviewed him the second day, and then we both did the interview after they won the East Regional. Each time I was more impressed with how he handled himself, how he took the questions in, didn't have a canned answer like so many coaches will have. They're just going to go with their own agenda no matter what your question is. He legitimately would answer your question. I can see how guys in the state stayed home for him. That's been the biggest key. The fact that he was able to recruit in-state. Thornwell was a really good prospect coming out of Lancaster, South Carolina. P.J. Dozier was a McDonald's All-American. His father played at South Carolina. His uncle played at South Carolina. He's from Columbia. He got him to stay home. That, to me, is the first step to this program becoming consistent and dependable. And I think he'll continue to do that. He's got a tremendous story, having been a JV coach and working his way up, getting some opportunities here and there, having his whole staff come with him from Kansas State to South Carolina. That shows you a lot as well, that they believed in him, they believed in his vision, and it's paying off in his 5th year with the program.
Even before the high school days, I heard that he was a bouncer as well. Did you talk to him about what it was like to be a bouncer at all?
We did. He said, I don't want to bounce again, but if I had to support my family, I would. I don't want to dig ditches again, which he did as well. But if I had to support my family, I would. This is an organic kind of coach, and it didn't happen the way that it happens for most. There are usually apprenticeships, and there's a path. This one was so circuitous, but it's made for such an intriguing and interesting narrative for him to get to the Final Four and to break through with this team, to do it for a school that had never been there before. I really think that's what makes this Final Four so unique. You've got the blue blood in North Carolina. You've got the Cinderella in South Carolina. You've got the team in Gonzaga that's never been able to get over the hump. They did this year. And then you have this Oregon team that is extremely talented. It's been forever since they've been in the Final Four, but they've been chopping away at this. Dana Altman, it's not like this came out of nowhere. They win games every year in the NCAA tournament. It was just a question as to when they would go on that extended run, and it just happened to come this year against what many of us believe was the hottest team in the tournament, Kansas, and they dismantled them in the Midwest Regional Championship.
And I think that's a great way to break it down, because we all know going into this weekend, the big storyline is going to be experience versus unexperienced when it comes to the Final Four. And those three coaches have a lot of experience, but they've never been to a Final Four. How much of a value do you put on the experience of not only Roy Williams, but also the rest of his team with that redemption factor from what happened last year?
Oh, I think it's huge, and I think it's carried them throughout most of the season. I saw North Carolina in person. They did not play well on the road at Miami. That was a loss to the Hurricanes. They did not have Theo Pinson for that game. He obviously makes a big difference in what they do. He's a facilitator. He's a high-energy guy. The understanding that I have is he's the one that keeps things loose in the locker room, and he's the one that gets guys excited and riles them up for the game. So that was a big piece that wasn't there for that. Joel Berry not being 100% is a big factor for this North Carolina team. He's the engine, and I think if he's not right, there could be problems in this matchup with Oregon. Here's the thing, when you're playing North Carolina, can you match up athletically? That's the first question that most teams have to face. The answer is yes for Oregon. So take that out of the equation. They're going to be able to go man-to-man against North Carolina and match up athletically with them. The second part is, can you play a variety of styles? Oregon will go pedal to the metal. North Carolina can do that as well. Oregon may be better at it than North Carolina in pushing it and being aggressive going to the rim. They've got something working for them right now. There's a belief with Oregon that I noticed leading up to that Kansas game, and then it validated for me when I watched that Oregon-Kansas game. They're playing at a higher level than they had played ever before. And that's saying a lot, because Dylan Brooks is a legitimate player. Tyler Dorsey has stepped up his game. All of a sudden now Jordan Bell is on the radar screens of NBA scouts because he's taken it to another level. They've done it without Boucher, which is a huge accomplishment. He was a big
Unbelievable.
part of their defense. So, Zach, with all of that said, Oregon, to me, is the hotter team, more confident team. Kentucky laid out a blueprint in that regional final in the South. It was that close to being John Calipari in the Final Four. I think Oregon looks at North Carolina and says, you know what? They're beatable, and we're the guys that can do it.
Ian Eagle with us, wrapping up with the man from CBS and Westwood One. Great voice for the tournament for over 2 decades right now, as Ian's kind enough to join us. I asked you this question when I interviewed you back in high school, and I want to see how it changed. I'll ask you it again, because you've done the tournament for so many years. If you could pick one coach out of the active coaches right now to win one NCAA tournament game, who do you go with?
One coach to win one game. I still would go Krzyzewski in how he prepares his team and the motivational factors that he can draw out of them. I don't think this was the best Duke team. They had issues this year. He had issues, physical issues, that certainly affected this group, the injuries that they sustained. But if it's one guy, one game, and you're asking me to take a bunch of players and find someone that can motivate them and get the best out of them, it would still be Coach K.
But let's take it a step further. So you give me Coach K. It's tough to disagree against that one because he's been so consistent for a bevy of years. If you had to give me 2 more and make a top 3, who are the other 2?
You know, I still believe Rick Pitino has this knack, and while there have been wide parameters of success and some exits in this tournament, he also has a way of circling the wagons and finding the best out of people. I think Rick Pitino has proven that he can play different styles, and guys respond to him and his coaching. It's tough love. You know, having sat in on practices that he runs, this is not a case where he hands it off to an assistant coach like a bunch of head coaches do. He handles every aspect of it. His fingerprints are all over the teams that he coaches. He's still someone that I would trust in a one-game format to go out and get me a win. And then the other would be Tom Izzo, and I'm saying this even in a down year for Michigan State. I actually thought he got a lot out of that roster this year. They were a 9 seed going in. They get a win over Miami. And I know the score didn't show it. thought they played Kansas fairly tough. It was still a 5-point game with about 6 minutes to play, 7 minutes to play, and then Kansas blew their doors off. Izzo is a guy that knows how to connect with the players, but does it in a way that he's not their best buddy always. There's a fatherly kind of dynamic to the way in which he conducts himself, and he knows where the line is in how to push his guys.
You can't go wrong with an answer really to this question, but for me, I think it's a little tough for me to keep out one of your old buddies in John Calipari in that top three, just because the way he gets his teams to adapt and really play unselfish basketball with all the stars. So how about Calipari?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with John because John has gotten the reputation of being the ultimate recruiter. It probably takes away from his reputation as an in-game coach. And John is one that will point out his own faults. He's not afraid of that. He's not afraid of owning up to things. By his own admission, what should have been a championship for him against Kansas did not materialize based on some late-game decisions with Derrick Rose in Memphis and that heartbreaking loss to the Kansas Jayhawks. And I think he still tries to shake that perception that he's not the best in-game coach, X's and O's coach, that he really made his mark as a recruiter and then as someone that can take talent and formulate a game plan with that talent. He's been a victim of his own success in many ways because they just reshuffle the deck every year, and he's made it known to the top recruits in the country, hey, you want to get to the NBA, this is where you go. Because not only will you be showcased on national TV, the biggest games, the biggest stage, we will literally have a pro scout day for you where all the teams will come to watch you because you play for Kentucky. That's the way it's gone the last 5 or 6 years. And John has been at the forefront of that, recognizing that that's the trend that was happening in college basketball. I give him a lot of credit for understanding it, for tackling it, handling the challenge, and year in and year out, he still finds a way to push the right buttons with a whole new cast of characters. Most coaches wouldn't sign up for that, believe it or not.
I got two more for you before we let Ian Eagle run, and let's squeeze it a little NFL right now. My poll question today is, do you believe the Eagles are moving in the right direction? I know you do more of the AFC, but with Carson Wentz now at the quarterback position, and there's some questions with the people running the team right now and the head coach, do you feel confident the Birds are moving in the right direction?
Well, I really liked what I saw from Carson Wentz last year. How could you not? For him to look so at ease, it really did remind me of Ben Roethlisberger early in his career, that it clicked, that there was a leadership and a confidence that these guys were ready to follow him at such an early stage of his development. So if you start at that position and that position only, I think they're in great shape. That's the main challenge that most teams are trying to figure out. There's a reason why the Jets can't get out of their own way. They haven't been able to solve that part of it. And the fact that Philly has a quarterback that is only going to get better bodes well for their future. Now, the moves during the offseason, were they inspiring? Are you now just bending over backwards to put this team in the Super Bowl? No, not yet. But I like their competitiveness last year. I know Doug Peterson got a lot of flack late in the season, and as the year progressed, people started to sniff out that maybe he wasn't the best game manager and the best decision maker. He still has to grow into the role. It's new. With that quarterback, Zach, I'm willing to take my chances that Philly's heading in the right direction, yes.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it's overwhelmingly convincing because there's still a lot of work to do, but because you have the quarterback and he appears to be as good as it is, it's tough to disagree on that one. And that's why when I opened up the show with that, I did say I'm going to have them going in the right direction. But before we let you run, I have to get in this big topic right now, and it's all the party atmosphere, the gambling atmosphere, and even that sports brothel that's going to be coming out of it. The Raiders going to Vegas, Ian, and I don't know if CBS is going to put you up at that sports brothel, but what do you think about the Raiders going to Vegas?
Yeah, I'm going to have to check our expense account and see how that works. Look, I think it's going to be really successful, Zach. I believe that town is ready for big-time sports. The NHL is heading there. The NFL is now heading there. First of all, the community itself is going to welcome the team with open arms, but they're going to get that other patron that just happens to be passing through, and they'll work their weekend around the fact that the Raiders, that the NFL is playing there 8 times a year during the regular season, and tack it on to the laundry list of things they want to do when they get to Vegas, whether it's a convention, whether it's a husband and wife, whether it's a couple dating, whether it's a bachelor party. That's going to be part of the fabric of the city. So in my mind, it was a clear money grab. I feel badly for the dedicated Raiders fans. Unfortunately, there just weren't enough of them that were showing up at games through the years. And look, they had been toyed with. They had been teased. They had been heartbroken based on the move to L.A. and then back to Oakland. Their stadium was outdated and antiquated. It was not set up for success. But I know where we're at in the world now, and the almighty dollar is going to reign supreme. And the money and windfall of money that's going to come from this move, how could Mark Davis pass it up? This was the best opportunity for him to increase the value of his franchise. We could debate back and forth whether it's being greedy, whether it's going over the line, unnecessary, but the fact of the matter is you had 2 teams in California pick up and move. One stayed in state, the other got out, and I think there were other suitors that would have had better deals than Oakland was able to give them.
The only problem I have with it is the way Goodell has handled this, saying that they don't condone gambling. And I get it because it's the perception and the political correctness that you want to create and not have anyone thinking that the integrity of the game is at stake with the gambling aspect of it, seeing how it has gone for other sports. But when you have all fantasy football going on and then you have a team going to Vegas, isn't it a little bit laughable when the commissioner says, yeah, we don't really embrace the gambling culture?
Yeah, that's been their stance forever, and it seems to be a bit naive in that everybody knows it. They know that it's a big part of why people follow this sport. I do believe in this day and age with the checks and balances in place, we don't have to worry maybe the way that we would have 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, of those two worlds colliding, of some bigwig in Vegas making his way over to a Raider practice and calling over a key player and telling him, hey, we need you to have a mysterious hamstring injury in the fourth quarter. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to go down that way. Just because they're playing in that city does not mean that there's going to be nefarious things taking place behind the scenes. I don't believe that those two have to cross paths at all. It just happens to be a city where we know gambling is the backbone, but I don't see the NFL having a huge problem in perception that there might be something underhanded taking place. What should the league do? Should they fully embrace it? Look, that's up to the league. They've got to sit in their meetings and make organizational decisions. I do like what Adam Silver has done and coming out and saying, hey, we get it. And there might come a time where we do something with it and about it because we understand it's part of the culture of the sport now. And you're right about fantasy football. It's another form of it. That's all. It's another form of having some side action on the game and getting the casual fan more interested. And it's worked to the NFL's advantage. There's a reason why it's exploded the way that it has over the last 10 years.
Hey, Ian, you're the best. We appreciate it. And by the way, I can't wait for Monday night to hear your call once again of the Florida game-winning shot in one shining moment. That should be some fun.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it, bud.
Thanks so much. There's Ian Eagle joining us on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. A very good spot with the bird. The bird has landed, baby. Always fun to talk to Ian Eagle. 4:40 straight up is the time in our Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios. We are long overdue for a break, but it's well worth it any time you could chat with Mr. Eagle of CBS and Westwood One. When we get back, Jeffrey Lurie, he spoke last night, and we have all the audio you need to hear. Jeffrey Lurie reaction coming up next on the Zach Gelb Show. Do you believe the birds are moving in the right direction? 609-919-9200. That's the number to play on a Wednesday edition of the Zach Gelb Show.